What they did in Hong Kong was spectacular. Millions of people organized spontaneously, but in an intuitive system using digital coordination, capable of overwhelming a city with 3 million people on 10 minutes notice. Made the French look like amateurs. And the French are the best in the world at this.
I did not, I did not. That is a story I did not cover. Now,
I was just over there in December, so I'm very familiar, and I met with a bunch of them. So I had more exposure to it.
What were they protesting?
They're protesting China trying to take over Hong Kong and take away their liberty.
Right.
They were protesting China's encroachment, the fundamentals of it were there are two court systems. One is a court system in Hong Kong that basically is based on British law because of the legacy colonial system. And then there's Chinese law. And then Chinese were moving to basically eliminate the second jurisdiction so that they could extradite and charge people in Hong Kong, where Hong Kong has been for decades a safe haven for political opponents of Beijing. And that that was seen as the sort of the final breaking point for the liberty in Hong Kong, which it was and it is. But what was spectacular about what they did in Hong Kong was they were able to again organize this concept where there was enough awareness and coordination. I mean, did you read all that Be Water stuff they were doing?
No.
Yeah, so they just broke it. So the French basically have a thing where they make an appointment to meet every Saturday in the middle of town and raise hell. Right, that's every Saturday morning. Until this is over, we're going to shut this place down. Right, they shut down Paris every Saturday for months until Macron finally is like, no tab, whatever you want, I'll do it. Right, Hong Kong is even more sophisticated, where they basically just took four metaphors for water: so vapor, ice, liquid, and I forget whatever the fourth incarnation was.
Steam?
Huh?
Steam?
Steam, yeah. And so they basically would literally text each other with these different formations, and they would either dissipate rapidly, accumulate immediately, freeze and lock up a situation. And so those behaviors, which were intuitive and known within millions of young people, 3 million people got, it's crazy. And they could organize and shift immediately from these sort of locked cubes where they could shut anything down to complete an immediate, everybody would scatter, to the accumulation of dew, basically, where they would start to build. And it was just remarkable.
So, we don't have time to get into this, but so I had a guest on the show recently from the Black Agenda Report, Danny Haifong, and he said that their government is very responsive to their people. And I said, how could that be? They have one-party rule. Why would they ever be responsive to their people? What did you find when you were there?
Well, again, I was in Beijing a couple of times, and I've been in Western China once. I don't think I'm really qualified to have an opinion. I lived in Japan for a long time, and there's a saying over there where, you visit you visit any country, but certainly an Asian country, but it's really not unique to Asia. But you visit a foreign country for a day and you think you can write a book, and you visit for a week and you think you can write a short story. And the longer you stay, the less you have to say, because it really becomes the complexity starts to reveal itself. I will say that Hong Kong is the front lines for freedom. In other words, if the agenda is to not have a single one-party rule, that the front lines relative to the encroachment of China on the world, and as much as I'm happy to indict the American system, I view the Chinese, at least the Chinese government, as by far the greatest enemy of the West. I mean, there's the fact that they knew that virus was in their country, shut down the domestic flights, locked up their city, and allowed international flights to continue to fly, knowing the virus is on it, is one of the most horrendous things I've ever seen done. So, there's no reason to hold your breath waiting for the Chinese to do anything nice for anybody. But I really was impressed by the young people that I met in Hong Kong who were more engaged and more active and more conscious about their position relative to China and relative to the ideas of liberty and freedom than any group of people that I've ever met in my life.
What do you say to the people who say that China's so they don't do capitalism? I mean, they have a market economy. They don't call it capitalism, but that that their system, as opposed to our system or any others, has brought 500 million, probably more, out of poverty. Isn't their system the greatest anti-poverty program in the history of the world? That's what they would say. What do you, and I never know what to say back to that.
I mean, yeah, sure, but they also do a lot of isolation of minority races and killing them, whether it's the Uyghurs or the Tibetans. I mean, an authoritarian can tell you a great story about sections of the society that have benefited from their investment, but they don't tell you about the sections of society that they've either enslaved, put into containment camps, or killed.
Right.
I mean, the same way I can tell you a great story about American entrepreneurialism and the development of Google and Tesla and the glories of Hollywood and the bootstrapping of the small businesses in Nebraska, and those are all true stories. Those are real things, and they're good things, and they have happened, and they do happen. And the ability for a young comedian from Los Angeles to have a really popular web show using this technology and hang around and talk to his friends and other smart people and make a living. I mean, that's a great story. Excuse me. But it doesn't dispel the other story that we just told. So I can tell you lovely stories about some of the benefits of the Chinese investment in their infrastructure and their very deliberate planning, which is impressive, to say the least, relative to their development. But I can also tell you the stories of their brutal murder, containment, and destruction of huge sections of their population. And they are the only country in the world that rivals America for its imperial instinct. Russia doesn't exist as an imperial force at this point in the world.
No.
There are only two imperial forces on this planet right now, and one of them is China. And you could even argue China may be the most aggressive imperial force in the world right now.
So we spread our imperialism at the point of a gun and a bomb. How are they spreading their imperialism?
The Belt and Road Initiative, my friend. I mean, they are the greatest creditor and financier. They have been building a global transportation network, basically. So the Italians are bankrupt after the financial crisis, and they need to rebuild the port in Trieste in northeastern Italy in order to be able to bring imports on shore. They don't have the money, so the Chinese come in and say, we'll give you $30 billion. And now we control your port. But you get a brand new super state-of-the-art Shanghai port. And so they have been doing it with money globally for decades, and they continue to do it. The end game gives them total control of the global transportation and infrastructure network and total dependence of all of these countries on them as their creditor, which gives China incredible political leverage, whether it's in Africa, South America, or in Europe.
So no one's ever explained that to me before. So
yeah,
how?
It's called the Belt and Road Initiative. When you do some reading, you'll be deeply horrified.
The Belt and Road Initiative. Okay, so
BRI.
Okay. So now there's a military pivot happening to the Pacific, because of China. How the hell do we fight against them lending money to other countries to build their transportation infrastructure with a battleship?
We don't. We used to fight against them doing it because we used to be the financier of choice for those countries. Right?
Yeah.
The part of what America did after World War II was the exact thing China is doing now, which is be the financier of choice for core infrastructure for distressed or developing nations in order to win fealty and access to their mineral rights. And the Chinese are now the primary practitioner of that practice, which is why they control not only all the onshore production that they have in their country for the world, whether it's rare earth minerals and the sorts of things that people talk about, but also their influence and control over much of the mineral rights in Africa, much of the mineral rights in South America. And then they'll go in and do things like they'll build free roads and hospitals, all these really actually great social benefits that then create goodwill for them with the people, with the politicians, I should say, in the country where they're financing, but ultimately give them the ability to do what they will with that country relative to any Western. It basically extends their basic influence and their basic policy in direct opposition to the United States.
Okay, so now I understand it way more than I did before. Now I understand why there's a trade war. By the way, I heard today that the Chinese, because of the global economic distress because of the coronavirus, they've made overtures to renegotiate trade deals with the United States, but Trump has said he doesn't have any interest in doing that. Is that true? Do you know if that is true? Because I understand.
No idea.
I know that the first trade deal that the Trump that just made with China, they're supposed to buy $200 billion worth of stuff. It really was in the benefit of China, and there's supposed to be a phase 2 coming, which is never coming. Trump says it's going to come after the election, and that's because it's never coming, because China, there's really nothing in it for China to renegotiate. Do you know anything about any of that?
I just don't.
Okay.
I don't have any meaningful insight into that at all. I do know that China is by far America's greatest geopolitical foe. China is arguably better positioned than the United States at this point relative to their geopolitical ambitions. And it's almost an inevitability that by 2050, China will be by far the most dominant economy on the earth by a factor of double the United States.
Hey, this is the part where I tell you where our live shows are, but there aren't any. And then I would tell you to go join our premium, but nobody has a fucking job. So why don't you just enjoy the video?